Welcome back to the nationally syndicated Price of Business show. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. And it's all of our business to be concerned about what's happening in the Ukraine. The world is so small now compared to 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, and it gets smaller all the time. What happens there impacts everywhere. And, of course, we're seeing it a lot in the economy here, but it's way beyond that. And when it comes to things like there's no one I like to talk to more than my guest in this segment, retired General Jeffrey Schlozer, really one of my favorite regulars and one we get great feedback about whenever he's on the program. General, always love having you on the program. Real quickly, before we get into our topic, why don't you kind of give us a little bit of background about your experience real quickly, but also talk about your book and how people can get it, which I consider your book must reading for anyone who's interested in leadership and how leadership should really work.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, so I wrote a book called Marathon War, Leadership in Combat in Afghanistan, based on really a couple of years of combat experience leading the 101st Airborne Division in Afghanistan, about 30,000 soldiers, including soldiers from a variety of different European countries. The book's available at jeffschlozer.com, certainly on Amazon.com, et cetera. More importantly, though, it's about leadership in really tough circumstances, and I think business leaders as well as those interested in national security would find it useful. Anyway, so thanks a lot about that. I did go, by the way, since we're going to talk Ukraine, I've been to Ukraine multiple times, including during my career. I had one of the dubious, or I won't call it dubious, but an interesting opportunities. My unit, I was a brigade commander. We flew Vice President Gore to Chernobyl from Kyiv in Ukraine. Not once, but we did it twice just to prove we could do it. Actually, it was an interesting time because everybody was wearing radiac meters and very concerned about it, but have spent a fair amount of time, and then after I retired, going to and from the Ukraine. It's a country I actually love dearly.
Yes. It's a beautiful region, beautiful people. I've spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe, not like you, but a lot of time in Eastern Europe and in Russia. And honestly, it's just incredible to see what they're going through. I really enjoyed the people when I've been there. I actually taught economics in some of the universities here. I did seminars on free market economics at a much more, I guess you would say, optimistic period right after the fall. And, they have largely chosen more cronyistic approaches. But, again, great people, and hate to see what they're going through. Let's talk real quickly about a lot of victory laps going on this week over what happened in the Ukraine with the incredible, take back by the Ukrainian military of territory that the Russians had taken. Of course, it's great. It's exciting. Depending on whose side you're on, and we both know whose side you and I are on. But, I think people can get pretty romantic about what happened.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you see a military victory like this in a rout of Russian forces, it's easy to get a little bit too excited and think this is the way the future is going to all be. But, for our listeners, basically, the Russians did get routed from northeastern Ukraine, a part that they had taken over during their initial invasion, including one of the largest cities, Kharkiv, in Ukraine, next to Kyiv. So they've been routed to the point where they're actually abandoning military vehicles and equipment. I've seen reports of, one unit leaving 35 tanks and 35 infantry fighting vehicles, not destroying them, just fleeing. Those are going to be recirculated into the Ukrainian army. Another unit, almost the same numbers. These are battalion or brigade-sized units, and it's fascinating to watch the Russians really go from, fighting hard to actually just fleeing over the last really week to week and a half. I think the important part, though, is what does this mean for the rest of the war going on? And also, what does it do to Putin and Putin's options?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, and it's very interesting. I'm trying to think of when I've seen anything quite like this, and I can't recall. It almost, maybe the closest thing that comes to mind was Iraq, during Desert Storm, or, of course, during the one where we apparently had won a war that continued forever. You know how that goes. But it's almost similar to those type of situations. And the type of leaving that we saw, we're talking about Russian troops, getting their hands on civilian clothes and trying to make it to the western part or out of Ukraine via the west. We're talking about full-fledged escaping going on in a pretty massive scale from what I've read. I hear that that Putin. I'm reading articles by Putin that he's no longer attending strategy meetings. You've got regional leaders saying that Putin should resign. I'm like, really? I mean, this is like really unusual type of things. And we have said for a long time, it's very doubtful that Putin's stable at this point. He does a lot of things that simply doesn't seem logical or reasonable. You have to wonder, does he have on the table options that a healthy person would never consider?
Well, yeah, absolutely does. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, just to kind of pound home your point there, Kevin, during some of the worst of the fleeing, over the weekend, Putin was in Moscow for Moscow Day commemorating a new Ferris wheel. That's not something that you see a commander-in-chief that had full grasp of what was actually occurring on the ground. You wouldn't see them doing that. But he does have options, and we ought to be worried about those here in the West and certainly in America because they could drive things pretty significantly in the wrong way. The first option, and probably the most likely one, is that, one, you're going to see a great divorce between, hey, Putin's not he's not the one making these decisions. These have been made by lower-level military advisors, and a lot of those folks are going to be trashed. And they're going to keep Putin, clean from that aspect. What you'll also see, though, is I think Putin's going to play a longer game, and I think he is looking to cause Western Europe and Eastern Europe that relies on his natural gas and oil to have one of the coldest, most miserable winters ever, and since maybe World War II and the aftermath of World War II. And by doing that, what he wants to do is he wants to have those national security leaders from those countries who will make decisions, who have decided to become bigger players in NATO, make bigger defense expenditures, et cetera. He's going to break them away from the people because the people are the one who are going to freeze their rear ends off and they're going to go without this winter. And I think Putin's counting on that to cause a big change in how Europe is actually approaching this war. In other words, its support, its weaponry, it's all that kind of thing. Now, the other part, and you haven't asked me about this, but it's the more dangerous but least likely or less likely is that he chooses to rattle the nuclear saber yet again, and he could go all the way to the point of doing what I would call a demonstration. It wouldn't have to kill anybody. You just basically let off a tactical nuclear weapon, maybe fired out in the middle of the Black Sea or something of that nature, clear the zone, just to remind everybody that he has options out there if things go completely bad and he becomes totally embarrassed. I don't think that's likely at this point. More to follow on that. But those are two scary things that I think are coming up. One, a very cold winter, split off the Europeans from their own government. And then secondly, a demonstration of some kind of nature like this, a tactical nuclear weapon.
Which violates so many treaties. It's not even funny. He's now it's like a rogue state. Russia has become like a rogue state. And it's always had a little bit of that quality. It's never been one of the more civilized players out there. But, it already acts outrageous with human rights violations claims against him, and et cetera. For those not familiar with the use of the word tactical nuclear bomb, it's a bomb that was designed to be used in a theater of war, even with troops fairly near to where the action has happened. And we even played with the idea back in the 1970s with a neutron bomb. And it was eventually, which is exactly what it was, right? This kill people, but not buildings, not infrastructure. That's what a neutron bomb was supposed to do. And the Russians, we believe, have those kind of weapons.
Yeah, they absolutely have small. These are small yields essentially, but they're much larger than conventional explosives. They do basically have radioactivity to them, obviously, and they can cause a huge amount of damage to. Even if they're not, around people, they can cause damage to terrain that cannot be used for farming or other things for, hundreds and hundreds of years. So this is something, as you said, it violates almost every treaty on Earth. And I do agree that by its invasion of Crimea and now its invasion of the Ukraine, that Russia has become much more clearly a rogue state, joining Iran and several others of that nature that we clearly say is a rogue state. I think, though, that what's interesting about this is that going nuclear is just something that's been inconceivable since World War II. And yet I'm not so sure, as you hinted to, Kevin, that Putin's got a full grasp of the situation, the full grasp of what the strategic implications are, maybe a full grasp of his own, thought process. And that's something that causes us worry, I think.
Yeah, and each time you say full, I think a full deck. I'm not even sure if he has a full deck that he's working with. It's very strange to watch. And it's very interesting because, as you know, I like geopolitics a lot. I like national security and international security a lot, studied a lot. I worked in that area in D.C., and Putin's always been an interesting character. And I always generally thought that he was actually one of the smarter global players out there. And, and again, insanity doesn't mean you're not smart. We've seen crazy people who are smart, but it makes you stop behaving in smart ways. That's what insanity does, regardless of what your IQ is. And I see a lot of that when I see Putin. He's not the same guy from 10 years ago. In fact, he's not even the same guy from 2019 before COVID became a major issue. I think he has suffered from isolation. You see these bizarre videos of him, half a room and very big rooms at that, away from other people, not wanting to engage, his unwillingness to hear any negative conversation, which is a lot like, when you read military history, what dictatorships were like when Hitler got bad news. Well, you should not have given that, even though he needed to hear that if we wanted to win. I see a lot of that going on.
Yeah, I think I've always regarded Putin as being canny, cunning, reflective of his KGB background, basically, and usually with options up his sleeve that that he could actually do. Now, as you said, this isolation that he has put himself through has been actually, I think, pretty significant. Has had a significant impact on his own. I won't call it mental stability, but it has maybe impacted him in ways that we really don't know. And therefore, when you take somebody like that, it becomes, even more chance that something unpredictable will happen. A decision will be made that may not seem rational by our viewpoint. And so I think we're going to have to be watching as the situation unfolds, but just how Putin, talks to it, how Putin makes actions, does actions, as he goes on. It's fascinating to watch this. Everything from the fleeing of the Russian soldiers all the way out to what are the impacts, strategically for Russia over this time period. But without a doubt, Kevin, he is going to put a vice grip on Europe this winter.
Yes. And, one of the things you mentioned is what that's going to be like, for the Europeans. But that also allows him to say, hey, you think you have it right. Look what we've done to the Europeans. Now they're really miserable. And, it actually becomes a tool of psychological warfare to put that vice grip on Europe.
Oh, yeah, he's going to, you can already see, the UK has a new prime minister. One of the first bills you're seeing here is to address this issue of being able to afford heat this winter for the Brits is the potential that they're going to put a very significant levy on the profits of power companies and oil companies, to be exact, and that money will be funneled back to the people so that they can afford higher bills. fascinating. It's more socialistic than you would expect from UK at this point in time. But that's kind of the example of things that could cause, social upheaval in some cases. I may be going a little bit too far, but it certainly is going to cause some level of unrest, some level of splitting off certain groups to say, this is not worth it anymore. Let's, pressure the Ukrainians to give up and let the Russians at least have some part. And we'll see what happens. But again, I do predict probably, a coldest winter in some cases in Europe since World War II, or since a few years after World War II. And that's not going to be pleasant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're unfortunately right, which is surprising because her new prime minister has really positioned herself as, Margaret Thatcher reincarnated. And she's got some history that backs that up, just some, though. I can't imagine her taking that approach, to be honest with you, in this situation. It's also kind of an interesting tell for countries like, I think of France, ironically. When you hear about all these countries in absolute terror about what's happening, you rarely, when it comes to the winter, you rarely hear about France because of the fact that France has nuclear power that really solves a lot of their problems. And I'm sure there's a lot of countries, in fact, there are a lot of countries. Even the UK was going to be closing down some plants, and they have reconsidered on a couple of those. And so it's really made people rethink everything.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's no doubt that Europe is having to rethink, including Germany, which was unthinkable 2 years ago, but they're rethinking the green movement, the closure of nuclear power plants, as you said, and just how fast they try to transition off of fossil fuels to renewables. It's going to impact all of that, and it'll probably be impactful for decades, I would say. Yeah,
and I was thinking Germany when I spoke English. No pun intended. But it was Germany that did that. Yeah. And so, in fact, I know they said they weren't closing down at least one, probably won't close down two. And there was three that were on the chopping block, now that you say that. So, there's a lot going on. Final thoughts as we wrap it up. What do you think the West should be doing rather than just victory laps?
Well, right now, I think we ought to be, doubling down on our support to the Ukrainians. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we don't have to double down. We've got very significant weapons going in. Keep that flow going. Keep the ammunition going. Keep the capability going. Keep the verbal support strategically in the UN and other places like that. And let the Ukrainians continue to fight this war. They're the ones that are, it counts the most for. But we all have a hand in the successful outcome of it. So that's all I would say is let's double down and continue to try to make them successful.
Retired General Jeffrey Schloesser. He is a show favorite, a personal favorite, and I am already looking forward to your next visit. I hope you have a great day. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you.
I'm Kevin Price. This is The Price of Business. Stay tuned for more.